Brannigan had seen his fair share of abandoned structures in his career as a structural engineer, but the old factory on the edge of town exuded an eerily silent aura that sent a chill down his spine. The building loomed before him, a hulking monolith of crumbling brick and shattered glass, casting long shadows in the fading afternoon light. Alex adjusted his tool belt and took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of rust and decay. The factory had been shut down for years, a casualty of economic downturn and neglect. Yet here he was, tasked with assessing the stability of the structure for potential redevelopment. The odd request came from a private contractor who'd offered a hefty sum for a thorough inspection. Money wasn't a problem, but something about this place felt off. As he stepped through the broken doorway, the sound of his footsteps echoed through the vast, empty space, amplifying the sense of foreboding. The interior was a labyrinth of rusted machinery and forgotten tools, each corner cloaked in shadows that seemed to move ever so slightly when he wasn't looking. It was oddly unsettling, as if the building itself was aware of his presence. Alex's flashlight beam cut through the dimness, revealing pipes snaking along the walls and ceiling. They were unlike any plumbing he had seen before, twisted, contorted, and branching off in impossible directions. Some pipes appeared ancient, covered in a thick layer of grime, while others looked newly forged, gleaming under the light. Strange, he muttered to himself, his voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, an irrational thought that only intensified the further he ventured. There was a sense of something lurking just out of sight, a presence that made his skin prickle with unease. As he moved deeper into the factory, the pipes grew more erratic and complex, forming an intricate web that seemed almost organic. Alex's unease turned to curiosity mixed with dread. He reached out to touch one of the newer pipes, feeling an odd warmth pulsate through the metal, as if it were alive. The sensation was fleeting, but it left him with a gnawing sense of something profoundly wrong. He paused, listening intently. The silence was suddenly broken by a faint, rhythmic tapping, like a distant heartbeat echoing through the pipes. Alex followed the sound, each step bringing him closer to the source of the noise and deeper into the factory's bowels. The atmosphere grew heavier, more oppressive, as if the very air were thickening with malevolence. Turning a corner, he found himself in a vast chamber dominated by a tangle of pipes converging into a massive, pulsating hub. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a chaotic blend of metal and organic shapes that defied logic. The rhythmic tapping grew louder, resonating through the chamber like a sinister metronome. A sense of foreboding washed over him, stronger than before. Alex took a cautious step forward, his eyes fixed on the pulsating hub. The pipes seemed to react to his presence, shifting subtly, their movements almost imperceptible but unmistakable. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was intruding on something ancient and hostile. Just then, a loud creak echoed through the chamber, followed by a low, guttural groan. The pipes shuddered violently, and Alex instinctively stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. Whatever this was, it wasn't just an abandoned factory. It was something far more sinister, something that defied explanation. He needed to get out. Now. Turning on his heel, Alex retraced his steps, the sense of foreboding growing with each passing moment. The factory seemed to close in around him, the shadows deepening, the air growing colder. As he finally emerged into the fading daylight, he took a deep, shuddering breath, the sense of unease lingering like a dark cloud over his mind. Something was terribly wrong with this place, and he had a feeling he was only scratching the surface of the nightmare that lay within. The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time Alex returned to the factory, its dim light barely piercing the gathering gloom. He stepped inside cautiously, the heavy metal door clanging shut behind him with a finality that set his nerves on edge. The factory was even more oppressive in the dark, its vast interior swallowed by shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. He clicked on his flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness and revealing the twisted pipes once more. They seemed to loom closer than before, their serpentine forms casting eerie shadows on the walls. The odd warmth he'd felt earlier had returned, radiating from the metal, as if it were breathing. The unsettling creaks and groans of the pipes filled the air, a constant reminder that he was not alone. Alex moved deeper into the factory, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the silence. The rhythmic tapping he'd heard before was louder now, more insistent. It was a strange, almost hypnotic sound that drew him forward despite the chill running down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that the pipes were watching him, reacting to his presence in ways that defied explanation. As he navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the noises grew more distinct, an unsettling symphony of creaks, whispers, and chilling vibrations. The pipes twisted and writhed in the beam of his flashlight, their movements subtle but unmistakable. They seemed to be guiding him, directing him deeper into the heart of the factory where the shadows were darkest and the air was thick with a sense of malevolence. The whispers in the walls became more pronounced, an almost intelligible murmur that seemed to emanate from the very metal around him. Alex strained to make out the words, but they slipped away like smoke, leaving only a lingering sense of dread. He couldn't shake the feeling that the pipes were communicating, sharing secrets that were never meant for human ears. Turning a corner, Alex found himself in a narrow passage lined with pipes that seemed to pulse with an eerie light. The rhythmic tapping was deafening here, reverberating through the metal and into his bones. He reached out to steady himself, his hand brushing against a particularly warm pipe. Instantly, a jolt of cold fear shot through him, and he pulled back as if burned. The pipe twisted, moving in response to his touch. Alex watched in horrified fascination as it slithered away, joining the chaotic dance of metal that filled the passage. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, filling his mind with a cacophony of voices that spoke of things ancient and terrible. He stumbled forward, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread, each step echoing the rhythmic heartbeat of the factory. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the oppressive silence, and the ground beneath him shuddered violently. Alex fell to his knees, the flashlight slipping from his grasp and clattering to the floor. The light flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. Panic surged through him as he scrambled to his feet, the whispers now a roar that drowned out all rational thought. Blindly, he groped for the flashlight, his fingers brushing against cold metal and slick, pulsing pipes. The factory seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing closer, the air growing thinner. He could feel the pipes shifting, coiling and uncoiling in a grotesque parody of life. Every movement was accompanied by a bone-chilling groan, a testament to the malevolent force that animated them. Finally, his fingers closed around the flashlight, and he clicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness once more. The pipes retreated slightly, their movements slower, more deliberate. Alex took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He had to get out of here before the factory consumed him entirely. As he retraced his steps, the rhythmic tapping faded, replaced by the oppressive silence of the abandoned factory. The whispers receded, but their sinister echo lingered in his mind. He could still feel the presence of the pipes, their malevolent intent palpable in the air around him. Each step away from the factory felt like a reprieve, but the sense of dread remained, a constant reminder that he had uncovered something far beyond his understanding. Emerging into the cool night air, Alex took a deep breath, the tension slowly ebbing away. But the unease lingered, a dark cloud on the edge of his consciousness. He knew he couldn't stay away for long. The factory had secrets, and those secrets were calling to him, whispering of horrors yet to be revealed. Alex couldn't shake the sense of impending doom as he approached the factory once more, its looming silhouette cutting a stark figure against the night sky. The building seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, an unspoken warning that he was stepping into dangerous territory. But the lure of answers, of understanding the strange phenomena he'd witnessed, was too strong to resist. His curiosity battled with his instinct for self-preservation, and curiosity won. Inside, the factory was as foreboding as ever. The air was thick with a metallic tang, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional unsettling creak from the pipes. Alex switched on his flashlight, the beam flickering as if hesitant to illuminate the darkness. He ventured deeper, his every step echoing through the vast, empty space. The pipes seemed more aggressive tonight, their twisted forms casting menacing shadows on the walls. The whispers had returned, faint but insistent, a chorus of disembodied voices that sent chills down his spine. Alex forced himself to focus, to push aside the growing fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. He had to understand what was happening here, had to find the source of this malevolent force. As he approached the central hub, the rhythmic tapping grew louder, more insistent. The pipes here were thicker, more contorted, their surfaces slick with an unnatural sheen. The air hummed with an almost electric tension, a malevolent force that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. Alex reached out to touch one of the pipes, feeling the odd warmth pulsate beneath his fingers. A shiver ran through him, a visceral reaction to the unnatural heat. Suddenly, the pipe jerked violently and Alex stumbled back, his flashlight clattering to the floor. The rhythmic tapping escalated into a deafening roar, and the pipes around him began to writhe and twist with a malevolent force. Panic surged through him as he scrambled to his feet, the factory around him coming to life with a violent shudder. A pipe lashed out, striking his shoulder and sending him sprawling to the ground. Pain flared through his body, but adrenaline drove him to move. He crawled forward, desperately trying to evade the flurry of metal limbs that seemed intent on tearing him apart. The factory was a cacophony of violent shudders and malevolent groans, the pipes attacking with a malicious intent that defied reason. Alex reached for his flashlight, the beam casting frantic arcs through the chaos. He saw a way out a narrow gap between two massive pipes that led to a maintenance corridor. Summoning every ounce of strength, he lunged for the gap, narrowly avoiding another lashing pipe. He squeezed through, the metal scraping against his skin, and stumbled into the corridor. Behind him, the factory roared with frustration, the pipes thrashing wildly. Alex didn't dare look back. He ran, his heart pounding in his chest, each step a desperate bid for survival. The whispers grew louder, an almost intelligible chant that seemed to follow him, echoing through the corridors. He burst through a door into the open air, the cool night breeze a stark contrast to the stifling heat inside. Alex collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath, the pain in his shoulder a dull throb. He glanced back at the factory, its silhouette dark and silent once more, as if nothing had happened. But he knew better. The malevolent force within those walls was very real, and it had nearly killed him. As he sat there, trembling in the night, a sense of dread settled over him. The factory wasn't just abandoned, it was alive, and it was hostile. Alex had to find a way to stop it, to understand the malevolent force that drove it. But one thing was clear, whatever this was, it was only the beginning of a nightmare that defied explanation. The antiseptic smell of the hospital room did little to calm Alex's nerves as he recounted his ordeal to his colleague and closest friend, Mark Lewis. The skeptical look on Mark's face was impossible to miss, his brows furrowed in a mixture of concern and disbelief. Alex understood the skepticism. His story sounded like the ravings of a madman, but the pain in his shoulder and the vivid memory of the pipe's violent attack were all too real. "You sure you're not just overworked?" Alex, Mark asked, his tone gentle but firm. "I've seen you pull some crazy hours lately." Alex shook his head, the desperation clear in his eyes. "I know how it sounds, Mark, but I'm telling you, there's something wrong with that place. The pipes, they moved. They attacked me." Mark sighed, leaning back in his chair. "All right, let's say I believe you. What's the next step?" Alex leaned forward, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "I need you to come with me. I need another set of eyes on this. I can't do it alone." Mark hesitated, the reluctance evident in his posture. "Alex, if this is real, it's dangerous. We should go to the authorities. Let them handle it." "I tried," Alex replied, his frustration palpable. "They think I'm crazy. But I know what I saw. Please, Mark, I need your help." Mark studied him for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. Finally he nodded, a reluctant ally in Alex's desperate quest. "All right, I'll come with you, but if things get too dangerous, we get out." "Agreed." Alex nodded, relief washing over him. "Agreed." The drive back to the factory was tense, the unease in the air thickening with every mile. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the car like dark tendrils. Alex's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead, the sense of unseen danger growing with each passing moment. As they arrived at the factory, Mark's skepticism gave way to a cautious wariness. The building loomed before them, its dark silhouette a stark reminder of the horrors within. They stepped out of the car, the night air cool and foreboding. Alex led the way, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Inside, the factory was eerily silent, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on them like a weight. Mark's eyes widened as he took in the twisted pipes, their contorted forms casting eerie shadows on the walls. "This place gives me the creeps," he muttered, his earlier skepticism fading. "Just wait," Alex said, his voice a low whisper. "You'll see." They ventured deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, the unsettling creaks and groans of the pipes filling the air. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, the sense of foreboding growing stronger with each step. The rhythmic tapping had returned, faint but unmistakable, a sinister heartbeat echoing through the factory. Mark's expression shifted from wariness to genuine concern as the whispers began, faint at first but growing louder, more insistent. "What the hell is that?" he asked, his voice tinged with fear. Alex didn't answer, his focus on the path ahead. They reached the central hub, the massive tangle of pipes pulsing with a malevolent energy. The air hummed with an almost electric tension, the whispers now a cacophony of disembodied voices. Suddenly the pipes shuddered violently, and a low, guttural groan echoed through the chamber. Mark's eyes widened in horror as the pipes began to move, twisting and writhing with a life of their own. "Alex, we need to get out of here," he said, his voice trembling. "Not yet," Alex replied, determination etched on his face. "We need to understand this. We need to find a way to stop it." But as the pipes grew more agitated, lashing out with a malevolent force, it became clear that understanding this nightmare might come at a great cost. Alex and Mark retreated, the factory closing in around them, the sense of unseen danger now a palpable, terrifying presence. They stumbled out into the night, the oppressive silence of the factory replaced by the cool, crisp air. Alex took a deep breath, the weight of what they had witnessed settling over him like a dark cloud. He knew they had only scratched the surface of the horror within those walls, and the path ahead would be fraught with peril. But with Mark by his side, he felt a glimmer of hope. They would find a way to stop this malevolent force, no matter the cost. The air inside the factory felt heavier, thicker, as if it were imbued with the weight of dark secrets and hidden horrors. Alex and Mark moved cautiously through the labyrinthine corridors, their flashlights cutting narrow beams through the oppressive gloom. The rhythmic tapping that had haunted Alex's earlier visits was now a constant, almost mocking presence, guiding them deeper into the heart of the nightmare. "Are you sure about this?" Mark asked, his voice a hushed whisper that barely carried over the sound of their footsteps. "We need to get to the core of this place," Alex replied, his determination unwavering despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "There has to be something, some clue, that explains what's happening here." They reached a section of the factory that seemed older, more decrepit. The walls were covered in a thick layer of grime, the air heavy with the scent of rust and decay. Alex's flashlight beam caught on a faded sign: archives. His heart quickened. If there was any place that held the secrets of this place, it was here. The door to the archives creaked open, revealing rows of dusty filing cabinets and shelves lined with forgotten documents. The whispers seemed to recede slightly, as if granting them a momentary reprieve. Alex and Mark exchanged a glance, then set to work, rifling through the papers in search of answers. It didn't take long for them to find something. Alex pulled out a thick folder, its edges yellowed with age. The label read Project PIPE Initial Studies and Anomalous Findings. He opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the pages filled with technical jargon and hastily scribbled notes. "Listen to this," Alex said, his voice tense with anticipation. "Subject exhibits signs of sentience. The pipes appear to respond to stimuli, displaying behaviors akin to predatory instincts. Further study required to determine origin and potential applications." Mark frowned, leaning over to read the document. "Predatory instincts. Are they saying these pipes are alive?" Alex nodded, a chill running down his spine. "And sentient. This wasn't just a factory. It was some kind of experiment." They delved deeper into the folder, uncovering reports of strange incidents, workers disappearing, and failed attempts to contain whatever force animated the pipes. The more they read, the clearer it became that the factory had been a breeding ground for something ancient and malevolent. "Look at this," Mark said, holding up a photograph. It showed a group of scientists standing in front of a massive, pulsating hub of pipes, similar to what Alex had seen in the central chamber. But there was something else in the photo, a shadowy figure barely visible behind the pipes, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Alex's blood ran cold. "That's it. That's the core. That's what we need to find." They continued searching, finding maps and diagrams that detailed the factory's layout, highlighting areas marked as high risk and do not enter. It was clear that those who had worked here had known about the dangers, but had pressed on, driven by a curiosity that mirrored Alex's own. As they pieced together the history of the factory, a clearer picture emerged. The pipes were not a natural phenomenon. They were the result of tampering with forces beyond human comprehension. The scientists had awakened something, and in their hubris, had lost control. "There's a reference here to a containment protocol," Alex said, pointing to a section of the document. "In the event of a breach, initiate Protocol Epsilon. Sever the main conduits to disrupt the network's integrity." Mark nodded, a grim determination in his eyes. "Then that's our plan. We find these main conduits and cut them off. It's our best shot." The rhythmic tapping resumed, louder and more insistent, as if the factory itself was aware of their discovery and sought to dissuade them. The oppressive atmosphere grew thicker, the whispers more frantic. But Alex and Mark were resolute. They had uncovered the truth, and now they had a plan. The malevolent force that had turned this factory into a nightmare would not go down without a fight, but they were ready. With the knowledge they had gained, they would confront the horror head-on, determined to put an end to the madness that had claimed so many lives. As they left the archives, the factory seemed to close in around them, the walls pulsing with a sinister energy. The battle ahead would be perilous, but they were no longer in the dark. They had the truth, and with it, a glimmer of hope. Alex and Mark stood at the threshold of the factory's heart, where the pipes were thickest and the air most oppressive. The rhythmic tapping had grown into a relentless pulse, reverberating through the very walls and into their bones. The factory seemed to be alive, a malevolent entity that watched and waited, its intentions clear they were not welcome here. "Ready?" Alex asked, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of groans and creaks. Mark nodded, gripping his flashlight tightly. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's get this over with." They stepped into the central chamber, the massive tangle of pipes pulsing with a sinister energy. The oppressive air felt almost alive, pressing down on them with a suffocating dread. Each step forward was a struggle against the unseen force that seemed to claw at their resolve. Alex led the way, navigating through the maze of metal limbs that writhed and twisted with malevolent intent. The whispers had grown louder, an almost intelligible chorus of disembodied voices that seemed to come from the pipes themselves. He could feel their presence, a relentless pursuit that dogged their every move. "This way," Alex said, consulting the map they had found in the archives. The main conduits were located in the deepest part of the factory, a network of pipes that fed into the core. If they could sever those, they might be able to disrupt the entire system. As they moved deeper into the factory, the pipe's attacks grew more frequent and aggressive. A sudden shudder ran through the ground, and a pipe lashed out, narrowly missing Mark's head. He ducked, cursing under his breath. "They're getting more violent," he said, his voice strained with fear. Alex nodded, his jaw set in grim determination. "We're close. They know it." They reached a junction where several massive pipes converged, their surfaces slick with an unnatural sheen. The air hummed with an almost electric tension, the whispers now a deafening roar. Alex could feel the malevolent force growing stronger, a relentless pressure that threatened to overwhelm him. "Here," he said, pointing to the main conduits. "We need to cut these off." Mark set to work, his hands shaking as he pulled out the tools they had brought. The pipes writhed and twisted, as if aware of their intentions, their movements becoming more frantic and aggressive. Alex kept watch, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the malevolent forms that lurked in the shadows. A loud creak echoed through the chamber, followed by a violent shudder. The pipes lashed out, striking with a malevolent force that sent Alex sprawling to the ground. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. The factory was fighting back, determined to protect its core. "Almost got it," Mark shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of groans and creaks. Alex watched in horror as a pipe coiled around Mark's leg, pulling him towards the writhing mass. He lunged forward, grabbing Mark's arm and pulling with all his strength. The pipe tightened its grip, and for a moment it seemed as if the factory would claim another victim. "Hold on," Alex shouted, his voice filled with desperation. With a final desperate effort, he managed to free Mark, the pipe recoiling with a malevolent hiss. Mark stumbled back, his face pale and drenched in sweat. "Got it," he gasped, holding up the severed conduit. The factory shuddered violently, the pipes thrashing with a fury that shook the very ground beneath their feet. The whispers reached a crescendo, a deafening roar that echoed through the chamber. Alex could feel the malevolent force weakening, its grip loosening as the severed conduit disrupted the network. "We need to move," now Alex shouted, grabbing Mark's arm and pulling him towards the exit. They ran, the factory collapsing around them, the pipes lashing out with a desperate fury. The ground shuddered, and the walls seemed to close in, the malevolent entity's final attempt to claim them. But Alex and Mark pushed on, driven by a determination to survive and put an end to the nightmare. They burst out into the cool night air, the oppressive atmosphere of the factory replaced by a blessed silence. Alex collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath, the weight of what they had done settling over him. They had disrupted the malevolent force, but at a great cost. Mark sat beside him, his face pale and haunted. "Did we do it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Alex nodded, his eyes fixed on the dark silhouette of the factory. "We did, but it's not over yet. We need to make sure this never happens again." The battle was far from over, but for the first time Alex felt a glimmer of hope. They had faced the malevolent force and survived, but the true test lay ahead. With the knowledge they had gained, they would find a way to end this nightmare once and for all. The factory stood ominously in the distance, its silhouette framed by the pale light of dawn. Alex and Mark had returned to their makeshift camp, a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with tension, the oppressive dread of the factory lingering like a dark cloud over them. Alex pored over the documents they had salvaged from the archives, his mind racing with thoughts of their next move. "We need to find the other conduits," Alex said, his voice a low whisper. "The factory's core is still active. If we don't shut it down completely, it'll keep growing." Mark nodded, but there was a distant look in his eyes, a hint of something Alex couldn't quite place. "Yeah, you're right," he said, his tone flat. "We need to finish this." Alex frowned, sensing the unease in his friend's voice. "Are you all right, Mark? You've been quiet since we got back." Mark looked up, his eyes meeting Alex's with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "I'm fine, just tired. This whole thing is getting to me." Alex nodded, though the gnawing sense of unease persisted. He turned back to the documents, trying to focus on the task at hand. They needed a plan, a way to strike at the heart of the factory and shut it down for good. But as the hours passed, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to weigh heavier on him, the sense of unseen danger growing with each passing moment. "Let's get some rest," Alex said, finally, rubbing his eyes. "We'll go back tonight, finish what we started." Mark nodded, but there was a strange glint in his eyes, something that made Alex's stomach twist with unease. He pushed the feeling aside, attributing it to exhaustion and stress. They had been through hell, and the road ahead was only going to get tougher. As night fell, they prepared to return to the factory, their resolve steeled against the horrors they knew awaited them. The drive was silent, the tension between them palpable. Alex's mind raced with thoughts of the malevolent force within the factory, the ancient entity that seemed to lurk within the twisted pipes. They arrived at the factory, the oppressive atmosphere even more suffocating than before. The rhythmic tapping had returned, a sinister heartbeat that echoed through the darkness. Alex and Mark moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The factory seemed to close in around them, the walls pulsing with a malevolent energy. "We need to find the other conduits," Alex said, his voice barely audible over the din. "Stay close." But as they ventured deeper, Alex noticed a change in Mark. His movements were sluggish, his eyes distant. The unease that had been gnawing at Alex's mind suddenly crystallized into a chilling realization. "Mark, are you all right?" Alex asked, stopping to look at his friend. Mark turned to him, his face twisted in a grotesque expression of fear and rage. "You don't get it, do you?" he hissed, his voice distorted, almost inhuman. "The factory, it's inside me. It wants you, Alex." Alex's heart pounded in his chest, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. "What are you talking about?" Mark lunged at him, his hands clawing at Alex's throat. "It's been inside me since the beginning. The factory chose me, Alex. And now, it's time for you to join us." Alex struggled, the weight of Mark's betrayal hitting him like a physical blow. He fought back, desperation giving him strength. "Mark, snap out of it. This isn't you." But Mark's eyes were wild, his grip tightening. Alex managed to break free, stumbling back and gasping for breath. The factory seemed to react to the confrontation, the pipes writhing and twisting with a renewed fury. "You're not taking me," Alex said, his voice a defiant growl. He backed away, his mind racing. He had to find a way to stop the factory, but first he had to survive. Mark advanced, his movements erratic, his face contorted with a mix of anguish and rage. "You can't escape, Alex. The factory wants you. It needs you." Alex turned and ran, his heart pounding in his chest. The factory was alive, its malevolent force now fully revealed, and Mark, his friend, had become its pawn. He had to find the other conduits, had to sever the connection that gave the factory its power. But with Mark on his heels and the factory closing in around him, the odds were stacked against him. As he fled through the labyrinthine corridors, the rhythmic tapping grew louder, more insistent. The whispers were now a deafening roar, the malevolent force pressing in on him from all sides. But Alex refused to give in. He had come too far, seen too much. He would find a way to stop the factory, no matter the cost. He reached a junction, the main conduits branching off in all directions. The factory shuddered, the pipes lashing out with a fury that shook the ground. Alex fought his way forward, his mind focused on one goal: destroy the conduits, disrupt the network, and end the nightmare. Behind him, Mark's voice echoed through the darkness, a twisted mockery of their former camaraderie. "You can't escape, Alex. The factory will consume you, just as it consumed me." But Alex pressed on, driven by a determination that burned brighter than the fear. He reached the first conduit, the massive pipe pulsating with a malevolent energy. With a final, desperate effort, he severed the connection, the factory shuddering violently in response. The rhythmic tapping faltered, the whispers receding. Alex turned to face Mark, his friend now a twisted puppet of the malevolent force. "I'm sorry, Mark," he said, his voice filled with a mix of sorrow and resolve. Mark lunged at him, but Alex was ready. He dodged the attack, using the momentum to drive his friend into the thrashing pipes. Mark screamed, the sound a horrifying blend of human and inhuman agony, before the pipes engulfed him completely. Alex stumbled back, his heart heavy with grief. He had lost a friend, but he had also gained a chance. The factory was weakened, its malevolent force disrupted. But the battle was far from over. With the knowledge he had gained and the resolve that burned within him, he would find a way to end the nightmare once and for all. The factory loomed behind him, a dark silhouette against the night sky. Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself for the fight ahead. He had come this far, and he wouldn't stop until the malevolent force within those walls was destroyed. For Mark, for himself, and for all those who had been consumed by the darkness. The weight of the factory's dark, pulsating presence pressed down on Alex as he moved through its twisted corridors. The rhythmic tapping had subsided into an uneasy silence, the air thick with the malevolent energy that seemed to seep from the very walls. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, the recent betrayal of his closest friend still fresh in his mind. But there was no time for grief. He had to finish what they had started. He had to destroy the core. He consulted the map they had found in the archives, his flashlight beam illuminating the faded lines and cryptic notations. The final conduits were located deep within the factory, in a section marked high risk. Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself for the dangers that lay ahead. He had faced the malevolent force before and survived. He could do it again. The factory seemed to sense his determination, the oppressive atmosphere growing thicker, the air buzzing with an almost electric tension. The pipes writhed and twisted as he passed, their movements more frantic and aggressive. Alex gripped his tools tightly, his resolve firm despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. He reached a massive iron door, its surface rusted and pitted. The sign above it read Core Access Authorized Personnel. Only Alex knew this was it. Beyond this door lay the heart of the nightmare, the source of the factory's malevolent power. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The room beyond was vast, a cavernous space filled with a tangled web of pipes that pulsed with a sinister light. The air was thick with the scent of oil and decay, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint hum of the factory's lifeblood. In the center of the room stood the core, a massive, pulsating hub of pipes and machinery that seemed to radiate malevolent energy. Alex moved cautiously, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of movement. The factory had grown more aggressive, its attacks more frequent and deadly. He couldn't afford to let his guard down, not now. He approached the core, the rhythmic hum growing louder, more insistent. He set to work, his hands steady despite the fear that gripped his heart. He had to sever the main conduits, disrupt the network that gave the factory its power. Each cut was met with a violent shudder, the pipes thrashing and writhing as if in pain. The whispers returned, a cacophony of disembodied voices that filled the room with a sinister chorus. Almost there Alex muttered to himself, his voice drowned out by the din. He could feel the malevolent force weakening, its grip loosening with each severed conduit. But the factory wasn't going down without a fight. The pipes lashed out with renewed fury, their movements erratic and desperate. A pipe struck his leg, sending him sprawling to the ground. Pain flared through his body, but he forced himself to move, to continue the task. He crawled forward, reaching for the next conduit. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if sensing their imminent defeat. With a final, desperate effort, Alex severed the last conduit. The core shuddered violently. The room filled with a deafening roar as the factory's lifeblood was cut off. The pipes thrashed wildly, the malevolent force within them dissipating like smoke. Alex stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had done it. The factory's power was broken. But the battle wasn't over yet. The factory, in its death throes, seemed determined to take him with it. The ground shook beneath his feet, the walls closing in around him. He had to get out now. He turned and ran, the path ahead a blur of twisted metal and flashing lights. The rhythmic tapping had turned into a chaotic cacophony, the factory's final, desperate attempt to consume him. He navigated the labyrinthine corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. The factory seemed to collapse around him, the walls crumbling and the pipes thrashing with a frenzied energy. But Alex pressed on, driven by a frantic determination to survive. He reached the exit, the cool night air a stark contrast to the oppressive heat inside. He stumbled out into the open, gasping for breath, the weight of his ordeal settling over him. Behind him, the factory shuddered violently, the malevolent force within it finally broken. Alex watched as the building seemed to collapse in on itself, the pipes writhing and thrashing in their death throes. He had done it. He had faced the nightmare and survived. But as he stood there, his body bruised and battered, a new realization dawned on him. The factory was just one manifestation of the malevolent force. There could be others, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. Alex knew his fight was far from over. But for now, he had won a small victory, and that was enough. He took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. He had faced the factory and survived, and he would be ready for whatever came next. The battle was far from over, but Alex Brannigan was a survivor. And he would keep fighting, no matter the cost. The factory stood in eerie silence, its once oppressive presence now reduced to a hushed, sinister stillness. Alex knew the respite was temporary. The malevolent force within the pipes was wounded, but not defeated. He had disrupted the network, severed the conduits, but the core still pulsed with a dark, unyielding energy. The final confrontation was at hand. Alex tightened his grip on the heavy-duty cutters, his fingers trembling with a mix of fear and determination. The rhythmic tapping had returned, slower and more deliberate, like the heartbeat of a dying beast gathering its strength for one last assault. The core lay ahead, a pulsating mass of pipes and machinery, shrouded in shadows that seemed to twist and writhe with a life of their own. "Here we go," Alex muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the growing hum of the factory. He stepped into the central chamber, the oppressive air thick with the scent of oil and decay. The walls seemed to close in around him, the shadows deepening, the malevolent force gathering its strength. The core loomed before him, a tangled web of pipes that pulsed with a sinister light. The rhythmic tapping grew louder, more insistent, the factory's malevolent energy focused on him. Alex could feel the weight of its gaze, the cold, unyielding intent that sought to consume him. He approached the core, his every step a battle against the overwhelming dread that threatened to paralyze him. The pipes writhed and twisted, lashing out with a fury that shook the ground beneath his feet. Alex dodged and weaved, his movements driven by a primal need to survive. The final showdown had begun. A pipe lashed out, striking his shoulder and sending him sprawling to the ground. Pain flared through his body, but Alex forced himself to move, to fight. He rolled to his feet, swinging the cutters with a desperate strength, severing the pipe in a shower of sparks. The core shuddered, the rhythmic tapping faltering for a moment before resuming with renewed intensity. Alex pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached the first of the primary conduits, the massive pipe pulsing with a dark energy. He raised the cutters, the weight of the factory's malevolent force pressing down on him like a physical weight. With a final desperate effort, he severed the conduit, the core shuddering violently in response. The factory roared with a deafening fury, the pipes thrashing wildly. The shadows deepened, the malevolent force within them growing stronger, more desperate. Alex moved to the next conduit, his every step a struggle against the relentless assault of the factory. The whispers had returned, a cacophony of disembodied voices that filled the chamber with a sinister chorus. Almost there, he muttered through gritted teeth, his focus unwavering. He reached the second conduit, the rhythmic tapping now a frantic, erratic beat. The core pulsed with a dark, unyielding energy, the factory's malevolent intent focused on him. He raised the cutters, his hands shaking with effort. A pipe lashed out, coiling around his leg and pulling him to the ground. Alex cried out, the pain searing through his body. He fought against the pipe's grip, his vision blurring with the effort. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, a dark chant that seemed to fill his mind with a relentless pressure. "You can't stop us," the voices hissed, their tone a sinister mockery. But Alex refused to give in. With a final, desperate effort, he freed himself from the pipe's grip, swinging the cutters with all his strength. The second conduit severed, the core shuddering violently, the rhythmic tapping faltering once more. The factory roared in fury, the walls shaking with the force of its rage. The pipes thrashed wildly, the shadows deepening, the malevolent force within them growing more desperate. Alex moved to the final conduit, his body bruised and battered, his resolve unbroken. The core pulsed with a dark, unyielding energy, the rhythmic tapping now a frantic, erratic beat. The whispers filled the chamber, a cacophony of disembodied voices that seemed to press in on him from all sides. Alex raised the cutters, his hands shaking with effort. "You're not taking me," he growled, his voice a defiant snarl. He swung the cutters with all his strength, severing the final conduit in a shower of sparks. The core shuddered violently, the rhythmic tapping stopping abruptly. The factory roared with a deafening fury, the walls shaking with the force of its rage. The pipes thrashed wildly, the shadows deepening, the malevolent force within them dissipating like smoke. Alex stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had done it. The factory's power was broken. But the battle was not over. The factory, in its death throes, seemed determined to take him with it. The ground shook beneath his feet, the walls closing in around him. He turned and ran, the path ahead a blur of twisted metal and flashing lights. He reached the exit, the cool night air a stark contrast to the oppressive heat inside. He stumbled out into the open, gasping for breath, the weight of his ordeal settling over him. Behind him, the factory shuddered violently, the malevolent force within it finally broken. Alex took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs. He had faced the factory and survived, and he would be ready for whatever came next. The battle was far from over, but Alex Brannigan was a survivor, and he would keep fighting, no matter the cost. Alex stood at the edge of the ruined factory, the night air cool and crisp against his bruised skin. The building that had once pulsed with malevolent life was now a twisted skeleton, its pipes silent and still. The rhythmic tapping that had haunted him for so long was gone, replaced by an eerie, haunting silence. He took a deep breath, the scent of oil and decay still lingering in the air, a reminder of the nightmare he had survived. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. Mark was gone, consumed by the very force they had fought to destroy. The weight of that loss pressed heavily on Alex's shoulders. a constant reminder of the sacrifices made. He had won, but the victory felt hollow, the echoes of the factory's whispers still lingering in his mind. As he stared at the ruins, a chilling thought crept into his consciousness. The factory was just one manifestation of the malevolent force. There could be others, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. The realization settled over him like a dark cloud, the sense of foreboding that had driven him here now a constant companion. Alex turned away from the factory, his steps heavy as he walked towards his car. He needed to get away, to clear his mind and figure out his next move. But as he reached the car, he saw something that made his blood run cold. There, etched into the metal, were the same twisted, contorted shapes of the pipes, a haunting reminder that the battle was far from over. He drove in silence, the road ahead a dark, winding path that seemed to stretch into infinity. The night was quiet, the oppressive silence broken only by the hum of the engine. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the malevolent force was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next move. He arrived at his motel, the rundown building a stark contrast to the horrors he had faced. The room was small and dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of mildew. Alex collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion washing over him in waves. He closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, he lay there, his mind racing with thoughts of the factory and the malevolent force that had nearly consumed him. The documents they had found in the archives were spread out on the table, a chaotic jumble of notes and diagrams. Alex sat up, his eyes scanning the pages, searching for any clue, any hint of what to do next. He had disrupted the factory's network, severed its conduits, but he knew it wasn't enough. The malevolent force was still out there, and he had to find a way to stop it. As he pored over the documents, a pattern began to emerge. The factory was just one node in a larger network, a web of malevolent energy that spanned far beyond this town. There were references to other sites, other experiments, each one a potential source of the same dark power. Alex felt a chill run down his spine as the full scope of the threat became clear. He knew what he had to do. The fight wasn't over, and he couldn't rest until he had destroyed every last trace of the malevolent force. He gathered the documents, packing them into a bag along with his tools. The road ahead would be long and dangerous, but Alex was determined. He had faced the nightmare once and survived. He would do it again, no matter the cost. As he left the motel, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. The world seemed eerily quiet, the calm after the storm. But Alex knew better. The malevolent force was still out there, waiting. And he was ready to face it, to end the nightmare once and for all. He got into his car, the engine roaring to life as he pulled out onto the road. The sun was rising, casting long shadows across the landscape. Alex drove towards the horizon, his mind focused on the task ahead. The battle was far from over, but he was ready. He would fight, he would survive, and he would put an end to the darkness that had claimed so many lives. The road stretched out before him, a path into the unknown. But Alex Brannigan was no stranger to the unknown. He had faced the horrors of the factory and emerged stronger. He would face whatever came next with the same determination, the same unyielding resolve. The nightmare was far from over, but Alex was ready to fight, and he would win.